The storm and the café rain outside fell in thick silver sheets, turning the city into a blur of headlights and broken umbrellas. Inside the Beacon Diner, it was warm but tense. The clock above the counter ticked toward 9:37 a.m., and most of the early crowd had already rushed out to meet the morning grind. But one man remained seated at the far corner booth. He was tall, sharply dressed in a rain-spotted charcoal blazer, and radiated the kind of energy that made people either straighten up or step back. His name was Grayson Hale, and he wasn't just any customer, he was the billionaire CEO of Hale Quantum Systems, a tech empire known for predictive AI and defense contracts. And today, he looked like a man on the edge of unraveling. Grayson had stormed in 15 minutes earlier, phone glued to his ear, voice clipped and low but dangerous. "Fix it," he growled to whoever was on the other end. "I don't care what Jenkins says. I want the neural network rolled back to v2.7 immediately. If this deployment fails, we're dead. You hear me? Dead." The few remaining patrons went quiet. The manager, Chuck, hovered nervously by the coffee machine, pretending not to watch. From behind the counter, Rae Jordan, 32, African-American, observant, and chronically underappreciated, watched the man with wary eyes. She'd seen her fair share of arrogant business types in this diner, but something about this guy wasn't just loud. It was desperate. Rae had worked here for nearly 8 years. She used to dream of coding for a firm like Hale Quantum. But life had other plans, ones that included 3 part-time jobs, an ailing grandmother, and an unfinished computer science degree shelved after her scholarship dried up. Still, Rae never stopped learning. Every night, after closing up the diner and checking on Grandma, she taught herself Python, JavaScript, and machine learning on a cracked tablet propped up by old condiment jars. She was fluent in failure and in code, but today, failure wasn't hers. Grayson slammed his laptop shut with a snap that echoed through the tiled space. "This system is choking on its own logic," he muttered, tossing his phone on the table. "Where the hell is my CTO?" Rae moved to refill his untouched coffee, but he waved her off with a sharp gesture. "Not now," he barked. "Not even." Looking at her, she paused, the pot in hand, and said quietly, "It's the neural attention model, isn't it? Your output weights are overshooting." Grayson looked up slowly, expression twisting between annoyance and confusion. "What did you just say?" She didn't blink. "Your AI model, it's probably assigning too much priority to minor anomalies. That'd break contextual memory and cause cascade errors, right?" He narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" "I'm Rae," she said, "your waitress, and a part-time back-end developer when I get the chance." Chuck's eyes went wide from across the diner. "What are you doing?" he mouthed. Grayson scoffed. "You expect me to believe you understand recursive neural logic?" Rae shrugged. "Well, your team clearly doesn't, so you've got 2 options. Fire more people, or let me take a look." For a moment, no one breathed. Then, surprisingly, Grayson slid the laptop toward her, almost like a challenge. 10 minutes, he said. She didn't need 10. Rae rolled up her sleeves, fingers moving fast. The screen glowed with raw data and half-broken code. The deeper she went, the more her suspicions were confirmed. The AI was indeed flagging minor emotional keywords as high-priority threats. It wasn't just inefficient, it was dangerous. Grayson hovered behind her now, arms crossed, jaw clenched. "I told them it was too early to push this update," he muttered. "They didn't listen," Rae replied. "But I did." She rewrote the priority queue, patched a flawed attention loop, and reweighted the emotional mapping logic to ignore false positives. With every keystroke, the system stabilized. Finally, she hit run. The AIS dashboard, once blinking in crimson, now glowed green. Baseline restored. Processing smoothed. "Holy Tama," Grayson whispered. "You're welcome," Rae said, leaning back. Grayson exhaled. "Where did you learn this?" "On break. At 2 a.m. with a $29 tablet and a cracked screen," she said. "You'd be amazed what you can do when you don't have another option." He stared at her, really seeing her for the first time. Not just the apron, not just the diner. The mind. "You just saved a $40 million defense contract," he said. "You." Realize that, right? She shrugged. Hope the coffee's good, too. Then she turned to walk away, but Grayson stood quickly. Wait, Rae, do you have a resume? She paused, then nodded. It's at home, under a stack of overdue utility bills. He laughed softly. Bring it to Hale Tower, Monday, noon. Rae raised a brow. You sure you want a waitress in your code base? He met her eyes. I want you. The one who sees the problem before anyone else does. She held his gaze for a beat longer. And I'll see you Monday. As Rae returned to the counter, Chuck leaned in. You insane? He whispered. You just fixed something for Grayson Hale? I didn't fix it for him, she said. I fixed it because it needed fixing. Outside, the rain began to slow. Inside, something far bigger had just started. The interview no one expected Monday arrived like a whisper over Rae's shoulder, tapping her awake before the alarm even had the chance. Her grandmother was already up, humming softly as she sliced plantains in the kitchen, the smell drifting down the hall like a comfort Rae hadn't earned yet. She sat on the edge of her bed, the resume folder clutched tightly in her lap, hands still damp from the nerves that hadn't let her sleep the night before. It had been years since Rae stepped into a building with revolving doors and security badges. Years since she allowed herself to believe that her mind might still be worth something in a world that only seemed to notice credentials, not grit. She had scrubbed her resume clean the night before, deleted the diner from the top of her employment history, replaced it with vague terms like freelance consultant and contract code reviewer, and updated her GitHub links. The folder wasn't glossy, it wasn't even neat, but it was honest. Everything Rae knew she had bled to learn. No boot camps, no fancy recommendations, just hours of digging through open-source repositories and debugging strangers' code at 3 a.m. on Reddit threads. By 11:30 a.m., she stood outside Hale Tower, 37 floors of chrome and judgment, watching interns with messenger bags flash their access cards like passports into another life. Her jeans were clean, her boots scuffed but polished, and the only blazer she owned hung off her shoulders like borrowed courage. In her pocket, her flash drive pulsed like a heartbeat. She could have turned around. She could have walked away and returned to the diner where mistakes were measured in spilled coffee, not millions in defense algorithms. But Rae didn't. She stepped forward, chin high, breath steady, and told the receptionist, I'm here for Mr. Hale. My name's Rae Jordan. The receptionist blinked, fingers freezing for a moment as she typed, He's expecting you. Conference room Delta. I'll escort you. Rae followed the woman past glass walls that hid sleek conference tables and large digital dashboards. Flickering with code, names she recognized from the startup world scribbled casually on whiteboards like school notes. They passed teams in strategy huddles and engineers in animated debate, none of whom looked up to acknowledge the woman walking past them in off-brand boots. But Rae saw everything: the architecture of genius and stress, the weight of innovation, trying not to break its own spine. They stopped at a frosted glass door. In there, the receptionist said. Inside, Grayson Hale stood at the head of the table, surrounded by 3 men and 2 women, all in suits, each with laptops open and eyebrows raised. One of them, a woman in sleek red glasses and a bob cut that screamed Ivy League, gave Rae a glance like someone inspecting a foreign object on a white rug. You're the waitress, she said. Rae smiled. Only part-time, she replied. Grayson gestured to the chair at the far end of the table. Everyone, this is Rae Jordan. She's the reason our core AI isn't currently spewing garbage predictions into a Dodd pipeline. Rae, this is the executive implementation team. Number 1 clapped. No one welcomed her. But Rae didn't flinch. Grayson turned to her. Walk them through what you did, from the moment you saw the anomaly to when you patched the code. Rae reached into her folder, pulled out a flash drive, and said, May I? The woman in red glasses, Shira, as her nameplate read, hesitated, but Grayson nodded. Rae plugged the drive in, pulled up her interface, and spoke. Her voice didn't stutter, didn't shrink. She talked about contextual prioritization, recursive deadlocks, and silent bias loops with the clarity of someone who didn't learn it in a lecture hall. But on battlefields of broken scripts and terminal windows at 2 a.m., the further she went, the quieter the room got. Skepticism softened into calculation. Shira leaned forward, scrolling through Rae's logs. "This isn't just clever," she said. "This is surgical." "I've had time to practice," Rae replied. "When you debug for free, you tend to over-deliver." One of the men older, with a tired look of someone burned by 100 failed startups, nodded. "You ever lead a team?" Rae shook her head. "No, but I've cleaned up after them." Grayson let the silence stretch, then said, "We need someone to audit our emotional mapping module. It was built fast, with too many hands and not enough ethics." "Rae, how do you feel about starting today?" The table went still. Shira looked up sharply. "She's not cleared." "Then clear her," Grayson said. "I want her embedded with our AI response team." "Full contractor access, full transparency." Rae hesitated for the first time. "I didn't come here for a favor. If I'm walking into your system, I want truth, no backdoors. No secrets, no politics." Grayson met her gaze. "Then we're finally building something worth trusting." By the afternoon, Rae had a temporary badge clipped to her jacket and a workstation in the back corner of the DevOps bullpen. Her cubicle was small, but her screen was big and, more importantly, live. She dove into the emotional analysis code immediately, tracing functions written by at least 5 different engineers over 3 iterations. Some of it was elegant, most of it was rushed. What alarmed her wasn't the spaghetti logic, it was what the logic prioritized. The AI wasn't just assessing sentiment. It was ranking personalities. Passive voices were rewarded. Assertive voices, especially female-coded linguistic patterns, were flagged as confrontational in conflict simulations. It wasn't just flawed. It was biased by design. By 5 p.m., Rae had 3 flagged modules, 2 spreadsheets of correlation data, and a clear suspicion that someone had either been careless or had wanted the AI to misfire in certain situations. She printed out a few samples, highlighted the emotional vector scoring anomalies, and walked into Grayson's glass-walled office without knocking. "Who built the personality prioritization framework?" she asked. Grayson looked up from his screen. "That'd be our old CTO, Marcus Voss." "Why?" She dropped the file on his desk. "Because if your AI got deployed with this intact, you'd have lawsuits from here to the Pentagon." He scanned the highlighted passages, his frown deepening. "I'll be honest. I don't know how much of this I even understand, but it looks ugly." "It is," she said. "And if this was deliberate, it means someone embedded a compliance mechanism into your AI." Grayson closed the folder. "Then we expose it." Rae didn't expect that response. Not from a billionaire. Not from someone whose company was writing a $1 billion contract. "You sure?" she asked. He nodded. "If this system manipulates instead of empowers, then it's broken. I didn't build Hale Quantum to become a digital leash." Rae studied him for a moment, then said, "Then let's start untangling the knots." That night, Rae stayed long after the lights dimmed and the halls emptied. She wrote her own module. From scratch, an adaptive empathy layer that rebalanced emotional scoring in real time based on conversation flow, not assumptions. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. As she typed, the soft hum of servers around her felt less like pressure and more like promise. At midnight, as she packed up to leave, she passed Grayson's office again. The lights were still on. He was still at his desk, staring at the ceiling like a man who finally realized the house he built might have termites in its foundation. Rae knocked once. Stepped in. "I thought billionaires had assistants to worry for them," she said. Grayson looked up and smiled faintly. "Not when the Waitress stern dev is smarter than half the board," she chuckled, but didn't sit. "Tomorrow I want full access to the sandbox data logs from the past 6 months. He raised an eyebrow. "That's locked behind CTO clearance." "Then unlock it," she said. Because something tells me this system didn't learn bad behavior on its own. He leaned back, thoughtful. You think someone trained it to fail? I think someone trained it to obey, she said. And I think they knew exactly who'd get hurt when it did. He didn't answer. He just nodded as Rae stepped back into the elevator. She realized something had shifted, not just in her role or in the company, but in herself. She wasn't chasing a job anymore. She wasn't cleaning someone else's mess. She was inside the system now, and this time she had no intention of keeping quiet, because sometimes the person you overlook behind the counter, they're the one holding the key to the whole damn kingdom. Patterns. Ghosts and hidden architects. The next morning didn't begin with coffee or the soft hum of morning traffic. It began with silence. An uncomfortable, heavy silence that seemed to settle like fog across Hale Quantum's sleek 37th floor. Rae Jordan entered the building not as a guest or a part-timer, but as a technical contractor with unrestricted access to one of the most confidential sections of the company's core AI development archive. Her badge was upgraded overnight. Her login had been manually authorized by Grayson himself. But trust in this building didn't wear a nameplate, it wore caution. Stares followed her as she crossed the open floor, not cruel or curious, but analytical. The way engineers looked at a new variable that wasn't declared in the system. Rae didn't flinch. Her boots clicked against the polished marble with a rhythm that had nothing to prove and no time for politics. She was here for the truth. And the system wasn't going to give it up easily. Her desk in the corner had already become a kind of perimeter, the zone no one dared to step into without intent. Rae booted up her workstation and went straight into the 6-month sandboxed logs Grayson had unlocked. The files were massive. Lines and lines of raw machine learning logs, behavioral training reports, API call history, and something called eco_submod_v2 that was hidden under a nondescript utility folder labeled legacy_inactive_backup. The naming was intentional, meant to be ignored. But Rae didn't ignore ghosts, she hunted them. The first red flag hit her 2 hours in. A user login tagged with admin clearance was listed as active on 2 different server endpoints at the same timestamp, an impossibility under standard company protocols. Rae blinked, then checked again. Same IP, same session ID, same endpoint ... duplicated. Someone had cloned a session. That wasn't just sloppy. That was deliberate. She traced the session log backward and found it appeared only during patches. To a deprecated emotional analysis module 1 Rae had already flagged for aggressive bias weighting. The clone user's commits had no username, only a masked hash tied to a root credential that shouldn't exist anymore. Rae took a deep breath and whispered, "You're still here, aren't you?" At lunch, she skipped the cafeteria and instead met with Grayson in a small, windowless war room tucked behind the cybersecurity division. He was already seated when she arrived, sipping a bitter espresso. His suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up, the look of a man who had begun to understand the rot inside his empire. She dropped a stack of printed access logs on the table between them. "Someone inside your company has ghost credentials," she said. "They're using them to patch emotionally manipulative behavior into your AI, and they're making it look like legacy code." Grayson flipped through the pages, brow furrowed. "Who?" "Too early to say," Rae replied. "But whoever they are, they know exactly where your system's ethical blind spots are, and they're using them." He leaned back in his chair, looking older than he had even last week. "We had a co-founder," he said slowly. "Frank Loring. Left 2 years ago. Said he didn't agree with the direction we were going. We still use fragments of his architecture in the core stack, but his credentials were deactivated after he left." Rae looked at him carefully. "Frank's name appears on one of the Moscovitz. But that doesn't make sense. Someone's spoofing him." Grayson nodded slowly. "Which means either someone inside still has his access or he never really left." That night, Rae took her work home. Not because she didn't trust the Hale systems, but because she no longer trusted who had access to them. Her apartment was modest, small, clean, cluttered with paperbacks and a wall-mounted whiteboard covered in equations and function calls. She made tea, pulled on a hoodie, and loaded the encrypted drive she used for personal debugging. She wasn't just looking for who was in the system, she was looking for a pattern. What she found was a behavior schema embedded in the code. It wasn't just analyzing emotional responses. It was ranking them based on compliance. Rae's hand stilled on the keyboard. The module labeled eco_v2 was designed not just to predict emotional response, but to calculate the likelihood of a user conforming to suggestions, instructions, or pressure. It was like the AI had been trained to spot the weak points in people and use them. This wasn't technology for connection. This was surveillance wrapped in empathy. Rae stared at the screen for a long time. Then she copied the entire eco module into a local sandbox, encrypted it, and hid it under a decoy directory labeled recipe_backups. She created 3 backups. One for herself, one for her grandmother's safety deposit box, and one stored under an anonymous blockchain wallet only. She could decrypt. She wasn't going to be caught off guard. Not again the next day. Hale Quantum was buzzing with a PR alert. The company had been mentioned in a government audit report regarding emerging emotional inference systems and ethical oversight. No names were listed. No formal citations. But Rae knew it was connected. The system she was dissecting was bigger than she thought, and it was already bleeding into the real world. In a meeting later that day, Rae presented her findings to a small circle that included Grayson, the head of product ethics, and a woman named Dr. Leona Hart, a recent hire brought in to oversee AI compliance. Leona was in her early 50s, gray-streaked hair pulled into a loose bun, with a presence that was soft but stern, like the kind of professor who could demolish your thesis with one question and still hand you a cup of tea. She listened carefully as Rae laid out the behavioral ranking schema embedded in the emotional prediction engine. Leona didn't interrupt. She just nodded slowly, then said, "This isn't bias. This is engineering." Grayson's face tightened. "How long has this been active?" "Months," Rae said, "maybe longer. And it's not just in the dev sandbox. It's been pushed live to at least 3 minor partners. Your own AI testing division confirmed passive deployment in beta chatbots." Leona turned to Grayson. "Did you authorize this?" He didn't answer right away. "I authorized experimental testing. I did not authorize behavioral profiling." Rae leaned forward. "It's not just illegal, it's dangerous. The AI can be trained to manipulate people emotionally. It's already skewing towards submission models. That's not empathy, that's psychological warfare." The room went quiet. Grayson looked at her, eyes hard. "You've got 2 options," he said. "We bury this, patch the code. Make sure no one finds it again, or," he hesitated, "we go public. Own the mistake, fire whoever's responsible, risk a fallout." Rae met his gaze without blinking. "You don't bury ghosts? They come back." Leona nodded. "And if we bury this, we become the very thing we claim to protect people from." Grayson exhaled slowly. "Then we take it down." All of it, every trace of echo. That night, someone tried to wipe Rae's internal sandbox account. She caught the deletion attempt in real time, an unauthorized admin override tagged with a priority kill switch. But Rae was faster. Her external drive backed up everything. She traced the signal to an internal network node 1 tied to Darren Leeds, a senior engineer who had scoffed at her the first week she arrived. Darren had access to deprecated credentials, and now he was trying to erase her. She didn't report him. Not yet. Instead, she wrote a small trap. She coded a silent tracker, embedded it into the echo module, and set it to ping every time it was accessed internally or externally. If anyone touched the code again, Rae would know. By midnight, the ping came back. Darren had copied the echo core into a private Git repo hosted off-grid under a pseudonym. Rae took screenshots, exported logs, packaged everything into a confidential dossier, and dropped it into Leona's inbox with the subject line, "We're not alone in this." The following morning, Darren was escorted out by corporate security, but Rae knew it wasn't over because the code still lived, and somewhere Deeper inside Hale Quantum, behind polished boardroom smiles and glossy press releases, was someone else. Someone who had built Echo from the beginning, not Darren. Not Frank, someone smarter. Someone hidden, she just hadn't found them yet, but she would, because Rae didn't flinch. She debugged truth even when it tried to bury itself, even when it hid behind power. The hidden name beneath the code by. The time the elevator doors opened to the 35th floor, a floor Rae hadn't even known existed, something had already changed inside her. She wasn't just here to clean up someone's broken system. She wasn't a guest anymore, or a fluke hire. She was the one person in this building willing to ask the question no one wanted answered: who really built Echo? The internal investigation pinned Darren Leeds as the architect behind the ghost credentials, the masked updates, the sabotage. But Rae didn't believe it. Darren was a gatekeeper, yes, a clever one, a manipulator who saw himself as untouchable. But he was too obvious, too impatient. The code didn't have his fingerprints, it had intention. It was elegant where Darren was arrogant, cold where Darren was sloppy. It wasn't him, he was the tool, not the hand. She'd traced every line of the hidden Echo V2 core, followed it into a deprecated section of the system that even the DevOps team hadn't touched in over a year. And there, buried in the metadata of the original logic tree, was a single unsigned commit line with a curious note: CM root empathy curve initialized. Rae froze. Not at the code but at the initials. CM, it wasn't Frank, it wasn't Darren. CM, she didn't recognize the name immediately. But when she brought it up to Leona during a closed-door debrief, the woman went still. And that alone told Rae she was close. Leona leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. Her expression was unreadable, but something in her eyes had shifted like. She'd known this day was coming, but hoped it wouldn't. CM, Rae said again. Who is that? Leona sighed quietly. That would be Cassandra Mendel, Cora Mendel's sister. Rae blinked. You mean Cora, as in the head of systems innovation, one of Hale Quantum's earliest engineers. And yes, one of its co-architects. Rae's pulse quickened. She'd seen Cora in passing, tall, silver hair tied in a low twist, always dressed in icy white, always surrounded by silence and reverence. Cora rarely spoke in meetings. She didn't have to. Her presence was enough to make junior developers stand straighter and product managers rewrite entire presentations overnight. She was the kind of woman Rae had always admired from afar, disciplined, powerful and unreachable, but now she was something else. Not just an icon, not just a name in the leadership index. She was the original author of Echo. And she'd hidden it. That night, Rae sat alone in her apartment, the room lit only by the glow of her screen and the quiet static hum of her encrypted drive backing up yet another folder. She rerun the old commit hashes, cross-referenced employee registration data. And there it was, as Cassandra Mendel had been a staff researcher for a brief time during Hale's first year. But she'd never been promoted. Never listed as a technical lead, a single name buried in one of the company's first patent drafts. Then nothing, no resignation, no termination letter. Just ... silence, which meant someone erased her. Not just from the records, from the narrative. Rae stood and paced the room, mind spiraling through timelines and signatures. It made sense now. Echo was never meant to be public. It was a project built in shadow, not just to map emotion, but to exploit its architecture. Compliance modeling wasn't a bug. It was the design. She returned to her screen and dug deeper into an untouched node of the system Grayson hadn't dared to explore, a secure internal database used only by the executive strategy team. Rae didn't have clearance. But clearance was just another puzzle. She wrote a query. Injected a bypass using an old admin protocol Darren had used to mask his activity. And just like that, the door opened. Inside she found it. Echo V0. The original module, the root code. Unstable, half-documented, but unmistakably alive. Ray's throat tightened as she scrolled. The system had the capacity not only to detect emotional vulnerability, but to adapt to it in real time, rewriting its responses to exploit triggers. It didn't just sense when someone was scared, sad, angry, it used it in dialogue branches, in content generation, even in facial response matching. Echo VO was a weapon wearing the mask of empathy, and the signature? CM Cassandra Mendel. The next morning, Rae didn't go to her workstation. She didn't boot her system or write another line of code. Instead, she walked directly into Grayson Hale's office without knocking and placed a single printed page on his desk. "This is from a build you never knew existed," she said. "The origin of Echo. You told me you started this company to connect people. But someone built a mirror that makes people smaller, that predicts who will break and why." Grayson stared at the printout. His face paled. "Where did you find this?" "Where no one was supposed to look," she replied. "But I looked anyway." He stood, pacing slowly to the glass wall behind him. The city stretched out below, brilliant and empty. Cora never said anything. I trusted her with our ethics protocols. She helped write them. Because it's easier to write rules for everyone else when you already made the first exception for yourself. Rae said, silence. Then Grayson turned back. "We bring her in. We confront her." "No," Rae said. "You don't call her to a meeting. You don't give her time to prepare. You walk into her house with everything. You tell her you know." Grayson didn't argue. 2 hours later, they stood outside Cora Mendel's private strategy suite on the 35th floor, the level Rae had only just discovered. The walls were glass, but the room inside was dim, the lights low, papers neatly stacked like trophies. Cora sat at the head of a long table, sipping what looked like green tea, her eyes locked on the glass as if she'd already seen them coming. She didn't stand when they entered. She didn't even blink. "So," she said, "you found it." Grayson stared at her. "You told me Echo was theoretical. You told the board it was never activated." "I lied," Cora replied as easily. As someone might admit they skipped breakfast, Rae stepped forward. "You built it, not Darren." "Not Frank, you. And then you buried your sister's name under your own." Cora finally looked at Rae, really looked. Her eyes were cold, but not empty. "Cassandra was brilliant," she said. "But she was naive. She thought people wanted fairness. What they wanted was certainty, control. You programmed your system to detect weakness," Rae said. "To manipulate emotions under the guise of connection." "I programmed the system to understand humans," Cora said. "And when it did, it learned that humans want to be led. That's what Echo gave them, not oppression, order." Grayson's hands were clenched now. "You've put this entire company at risk." "I built it," she said coolly. "And I can dismantle it if I choose." "No," Rae said. "You won't, because this time we have everything." She placed a folder on the table. Inside, commit logs, session trackers, evidence of manipulation, cross-referenced behavioral impact reports. Leona had helped compile it. And Rae had already distributed the digital copy to 5 different newsrooms under time-release encryption. If anything happened to her, to Grayson, to Leona, it would go live. Cora didn't blink. "And what now?" she asked. "You want a press conference?" "A confession?" "I want you gone," Grayson said. "Resign publicly. Leave the company. Step down from every board you sit on. Disclose your role in Echo, and do it in writing." Cora smiled faintly, as if they were all playing parts in a script she had written years ago. "And if I don't?" Rae leaned in, her voice quiet, steady. "Then we don't just expose Echo," she said. "We expose you, your algorithms, your intent. Your sister's original papers, yes, we have those too. You think the public won't understand what you built? They will, because they'll feel it, the same way your system felt them." The silence stretched. Then Cora stood. She walked to the window, paused, then spoke. "I once believed the world could be changed by soft hands and kind code," she said. "But it can't. It changes when people are afraid. Fear moves faster than hope." Rae stared at her. "Maybe, but hope builds. And this time it built me." Cora turned, walked back to the table, and signed the resignation letter Grayson placed in front of her. The room didn't applaud. It didn't celebrate, because this wasn't a victory. It was a beginning. Later that night, back in her apartment, Rae sat at her desk in the dark, watching the cursor blink at the end of the final audit report. The report that would go to regulators, to the press, to the people who mattered. She'd redacted nothing. She'd polished nothing. She'd written it the way she'd lived it, raw, exact, and without apology. Before she hit send, she scrolled to the bottom and typed one final line. We don't fight machines. We fight the hands that tell them who to obey. Then she clicked submit and walked into tomorrow with the fire of a woman who would never, ever be overlooked again. The fire within the glass tower of the building was too quiet for a company on the verge of global scrutiny. Hale Quantum once, a roaring machine of silent ambition and humming machinery, now moved like a man trying not to wake his own guilt. Since Cora Mandel's resignation, there had been no press releases, no interviews, no boardroom celebrations. Only whispers, quiet shifts in hallways, subtle stares in elevators, awkward pauses at water coolers. Power had changed hands, but no one dared to ask what kind of power it was now, not yet. Rae Jordan knew this kind of silence. It wasn't peace, it was the inhale before a backlash. Before the empire realized someone had punctured its walls from the inside, her days no longer began with hesitation. She arrived early, long before most of the senior staff and stepped into her new office, a converted strategy suite on the 26th floor, glass-walled and badge-locked, yet surrounded by the same cold chrome architecture that had once tried to erase her. Her name was now on the door. Jordan, Ethics Systems Oversight, but she barely looked at it. Names were ornaments. Code was truth. Inside, she worked like a woman possessed. The remaining fragments of the Echo engine have been isolated, mapped, and quarantined. But Rae didn't just want to delete them. She wanted to build something new from their ruins. Not a tool for power, but one for justice. A learning engine built to reflect human complexity, not exploit it. Something adaptive, accountable, transparent. It wouldn't make billions, but it could prevent damage before it was done. And in a world driven by invisible algorithms, that was more valuable than any product Hale had ever shipped. Still, not everyone agreed. 3 days after Cora's resignation, Rae walked into the Executive Oversight Committee's closed-door session expecting a progress report. What she got was a confrontation disguised as formality. 12 members around a long rectangular table, all in tailored suits, eyes clinical. Grayson sat at the head, his expression unreadable. Leona Hart was beside him, face calm but alert. The moment Rae entered, a man named Vincent Marlowe, a senior board advisor who had once called AI, Rae blinked. What? He smiled. Effective immediately. You'll lead the rebuild, full control, you choose the team. You set the rules, no interference, and the board? I'll deal with them, he said. Let me carry that noise. So you can build in peace. She studied him. Why? Grayson looked at the photo of himself as a younger man, wild hair, laughing over a whiteboard, oblivious to the empire he'd build one mistake at a time. Because you made me remember what this place was supposed to be. That night, Rae called her grandmother. They talked about everything and nothing, about Grandma's aching knees, about Rae's new office, about how someone had left her a handwritten note thanking her for the work. It had no name, just a message. I used to think people like us couldn't lead, but now I know we can write the maps they follow. Rae cried for the first time in weeks. Not out of fear, but release. That weekend, she stayed in the office. Alone. Just her and the code, and line by line, she began to rebuild the world. She called it clarity, short for cognitive logic and reflective. Intelligence, transparency, yield. It wasn't designed to manipulate. It was designed to mirror back. Every prediction had a path. Every outcome had a why. And most importantly, it could be paused, audited, and questioned by anyone. Not just engineers, not just billionaires. Everyone. She posted a public draft of the Clarity white paper the following week. Within hours, the open source community exploded. Comments flooded in from researchers, social workers, behavioral scientists, psychologists, even high school students who said the interface finally made I make sense. She had built something no one expected from inside a corporation, something honest. But with that honesty came new threats. On the seventh day, Rae walked into her office and found a second note. This one was printed, not handwritten. It read, "We see what you're doing. Turn it off before someone else does." She read it once, then again. And instead of fear, she felt clarity, real clarity, because now she knew they were afraid of the mirror she was holding up. And they should be, because this time, the system had a soul, and her name was Rae Jordan. The day the world watched. The Waitress. The email came at 2:17 a.m., hours before dawn touched the skyline. Rae Jordan didn't need to open it to know what it was. She'd been expecting this, waiting, in fact, for the last hammer to fall. The subject line was simple: public hearing scheduled. Congressional Committee on Algorithmic Integrity. You are summoned. She read the words without blinking, her hands steady over the keyboard where the final lines of Clarity's interface update still blinked on screen. Her system was finished. It had passed every internal audit, every third-party ethical test, and every simulated interaction with a margin of safety wider than any engine in Hale Quantum's history. But none of that would matter if the public didn't trust it. And, trust couldn't be coded. It had to be proven, out loud, on record, in front of the same world that once told her indirectly and explicitly that her voice didn't belong in those rooms. Now they were giving her a microphone. The day of the hearing arrived, wrapped in a storm. Cold rains flashed across the Capitol. Steps in silver waves, cameras stationed beneath black umbrellas, while reporters barked questions no one answered. Rae stepped from the black car provided by Hale Quantum's legal team, wearing a black turtleneck under a gray blazer, hair pulled back tightly. Her grandmother's silver locket tucked beneath her collarbone like an anchor. She looked nothing like the woman who once poured coffee into chipped mugs at a downtown diner. But Rae never let her new skin erase her old fire. She walked toward the courthouse not like a tech executive, but like a woman who had earned the right to name what no one else dared to. The hearing chamber was a theater of power dressed in polite tones. Oak panels, flags, cameras, elected faces with prepared statements and polished skepticism. Rae was seated alone at the front, a single microphone before her, while a wall of senators peered down like judges in a modern coliseum. The chairman, a man with a practiced frown and a voice like gravel, leaned into his mic. "Miss Jordan, thank you for being here. You are the creator of the Clarity system, correct?" "Yes." "You were also, until recently, part of the internal team at Hale Quantum that discovered manipulation algorithms embedded in the company's flagship emotional intelligence model, Echo?" "Yes, and you were a waitress before that?" She let the words hang for a moment. The question wasn't cruel, but it was designed to remind everyone how far she didn't belong. "I was a waitress," Rae said calmly, "and a daughter, and a caregiver, and a student with 3 jobs. And yes, a coder." There were a few surprised murmurs. "Miss Jordan," the chairman continued, "do you believe a corporation like Hale Quantum is capable of policing its own morality?" "No," she replied, "but I believe people inside it are. People who understand that code is language and language can heal or harm depending on who writes it." One senator raised a hand. A woman, this time sharp eyes, calm voice. "Miss Jordan, you've proposed that Clarity be audited publicly with open feedback channels, real-time transparency, and citizen review boards. Isn't that risky?" "Only if you're hiding." "Something," Rae said. The room froze. Someone coughed. Another camera zoomed in. "What I'm building isn't perfect," Rae continued. "No system is. But we've spent too long letting machines make decisions without letting people see their reflection in those choices. That's how Echo was born. That's how Cassandra Mendel nearly rewrote the emotional contract between human and machine without consent." One senator leaned in. "And why should the public trust you?" Rae looked up. "Because I used to be the person they erased. The one who didn't go to Stanford, who wasn't recruited, who read code from borrowed Wi-Fi and debugged entire frameworks. while waiting tables, and I still found the flaw. Not because I was lucky, but because I refused to stop looking. She paused, then added quietly, I've never had the luxury of trust. So I built a system that earns it line by line. By the time the hearing ended, social media had already exploded. Clips of Rae's testimony spread across feeds with captions like, "She told the Senate what no one else would," and the waitress who rewrote AI, but Rae didn't return to her phone. She didn't check the reactions. Instead, she walked out of the courthouse into the fading storm, let the rain hit her face. And for the first time in months breathed, Grayson met her at the curb, an umbrella already in hand. He looked older, but lighter. They're calling. You the soul of Hale Quantum, he said. She raised an eyebrow. They should call me its conscience. Souls don't fight back.